Heavy is the head that wears the crown. Kingmaker is just ending in Overwatch as the new season is coming through, and I want to give you my rough thoughts about it. Now, I didn't play as much of this as I would have liked. I really only had a couple of sessions because Marvel Rivals came out, and I was really busy with that. But I did still want to talk about it because I think it's interesting, and, you know, I'm going to be real with you. I don't see this coming back in any meaningful way. I don't think the response to it was that positive overall. So let's just go ahead and talk about Kingmaker. If you're unfamiliar, it's the max to 5v5 test that basically means that the one role or the single person in that one role. So let's say you have 2 tanks, 2 supports, and you're 1 DPS. That DPS is going to get buffed, right? So for tanks, I believe it is movement speed increase if you're alone, health increase, which just puts you at regular tank health, and then something else. And for DPS, it's flat 50 health, 20% cooldown reduction. And then for supports, it's kind of like the same thing. There's like one other thing. Oh, DPS get attack speed, supports get healing up. Tanks, I literally don't remember, to be honest with you. So that is Kingmaker, right? So that's kind of what the idea is. Let's talk really briefly about the system mechanics behind this, because there are some weird things, you know, people were kind of confused about how they may handle it, right? Because what happens if you swap roles mid-match and you decide to go to a different character, and now all of a sudden the king is swapping as well, right? What does that do? If somebody is the king on point or in the match, and then all of a sudden they're just no longer that anymore, do they lose their bonuses? How does that work, right? Well, turns out you can't do that. The way that they fixed that idea was that they wanted to stop you from swapping at all. So once you lock in a role, you actually cannot swap at all. So the second that you pick support, even if you're the first person to pick anything, you pick support, you are on support no matter what. This does kind of suck because a lot of people don't have the muscle memory to be locked in to a role completely, especially in like in a semi-open queue format. So a lot of times this leads to people just kind of picking before really thinking about it, and then you're going to get stuck with, you know, let's say like 2 DPS and 2 supports, and you're just on regular tank, right? And I'll talk about how I don't feel like that's a very fun one compared to the other combinations or particular other combinations. So I think there is probably a middle ground solution to this. I understand why they did this, but I think there's a world where there could be some kind of like request swap function where it's like, hey, can I play tank? Like, can we swap into different things so that now you can actually have, you know, a good team composition? Because if there is a meta of sorts, it's best to play one particular role, right? You don't want to just get completely stuck on that, and you cannot change that for the rest of the game. I think that's really, really frustrating. Other system stuff, as you can see in the bottom left here, look at that. Those are the team portraits from PvE. You might have seen these already. To me, they are a little busy because, you know, there's 4 of them. There's a lot down there. They are out of the way, sure, but when I look at it, to be honest with you, it looks a little crowded. Like, now that everybody has 250 HP, looking at that bar, like, it just looks like everyone has a lot of health. It looks bloated to me. I think this is just kind of me. I don't know if everyone will feel this way. I doubt it, to be honest with you. But it does look a little awkward to me with everyone's health, especially if, you know, your tank is not the king and you have a squishy that's the king who has extra health. It's really gonna look weird. So that is kind of something to keep in mind. A lot of people say that they want this in the main game. To be honest with you, I don't really care. Like, I completely understand why. But again, if you have this many people, especially like when the 6v6 test happened as well, that could also really exacerbate it because you're going to be adding yet another thing on there. So yeah, I don't quite know if I'm sold on that idea. But I think it's fine. They wanted to have it so you could see who the king was on your team, but you know who the king is because of the only one of that role. Like, I don't think they need a visual indicator. Having a visual indicator on the enemy king, like a crown, that's a great idea, but you don't need it for your teammates because you just know who's the sole per person. Just check tab. Okay, it's the DPS, so any DPS is going to be king. Because there's only ever going to be one, so you can't swap. So it seems a little redundant, but whatever. Let's talk about actual roles. So I said that there were, two different types of things, right? There were percentage reductions or percentage increases, and there were flat bonuses. So, right, you get 50 plus 50 health. Let's talk about DPS, because I think this is where it really... Actually, no. We'll talk about DPS for one example, we'll talk about support for the other. So DPS is one example where it's a perfect, kind of perfect showing why there's a flaw in flat increases, right? Because, let's say, keep in mind Bastion, right? Bastion has 350. He has 350 health, right? I'm pretty sure. He gets to have an additional 50 health. Now he has 400 health. Okay, sweet. So he gets, not that much added. I don't know the math. It's like 1/7 of his health bar increase, I'm pretty sure, right? Added to it. Tracer, however, has 175. And she also gets 50. She gets a much larger portion of her health bar increased for her. If you pick DPS, picking Bastion, that's a throw. Tracer is always going to be better because she gets more out of it, like proportionally more. She's balanced around having a certain amount of HP, and she gets a flat bonus that everybody else gets, but she gets proportionally more for her character. So that is already a problem. But just making it all percentage based is, I also don't think, necessarily going to solve everything, because not all cooldowns are made the same, right? So let's talk about cooldown reduction, specifically in support, right? I want to kind of talk about that. I'm going to give you the example of Baptiste, right? If it's 20% cooldown reduction, in theory, everybody gets the same benefit for all of their cooldowns. Baptiste throws a lamp down, he saves his teammate, it gets blown up instantly. He got basically like 1 second of uptime out of it. Not even, we'll say half a second of uptime out of it for the cooldown to then go down to like, 20 seconds, I think, somewhere in that ballpark. Now think about Moira Fade. Moira Fade is a very short cooldown that you're in Fade for like about a second, right? So it's her main survivability tool. She gets it back 20% faster. And again, proportionally, her uptime is going to be higher. That's just going to happen, right? So Moira actually benefits from this more. So even though it's a percentage, it is still benefiting certain characters more, especially characters that are designed around having it up often. I think it really benefits those characters, those kind of cooldowns, right? Like a Kiriko TP is another really good example of one. So it's not all made equal, and that is the passive problem. These are, at the end of the day, extra role passives added on to these characters, right? That's what it boils down to when we really think about it. There are going to be the haves and the have-nots. Some characters are going to benefit way more than other characters, and that is a really big problem still. That is already a problem we haven't been able to solve. Adding more to it is not going to solve that problem either. I think that is a really important thing to keep in mind. It's just going to make it more weird, crazy, since there's already there's already role passives on top of these extra passives. Some characters are just going to be even better, like Tracer with 50 extra health and 20% attack speed. Like, what? And cooldown reduction. Like, are we thinking about this? Isn't that crazy? Like, she's gonna be much better than Torbjorn. Just straight up, like, she benefits so much more. And of course, the DPS passive with the healing reduction, she's benefiting from that as well. Like, a lot. That is really a problem, I think, because it just makes some characters even less playable than they actually are, even though the idea is to kind of make more combinations work. I think there's a lot to it. So I really don't like that. Another really frustrating thing about this is that, let's say my team has a solo support and the other team has a solo DPS. I'm playing DPS on my team. I'm playing Tracer. Tracer's just a really good example because she's broken, right? I'm playing Tracer. They're also playing Tracer, but they're the king. I no longer can win the duel. Just straight up, I cannot do anything. An option has now been removed from the table because I cannot duel Tracer. I cannot pressure Tracer. I cannot mark her effectively, right? So I have to just completely think of a different game plan, which is kind of interesting, but I think it actually removes more from the table than it actually adds to the game, right? I think that is a really big point here that I'm trying to get across, right? So yeah, I'm not exactly sure if I like that. I don't think I like that, to be honest with you. The only role this doesn't really matter on is tanks, because since there's 2 tanks, it can be really easy just to pressure out that one. But even like the supports, right, it can be like, okay, well, I tried to shoot the Ana, but she just has more health than me, like, you know, if I'm on Ana, so she wins that duel too. It's really egregious on the DPS, and I think that's more of a problem, because you should never run 1 tank, and you should never run 1 support, because tanks and supports are very good. The value they provide, having 2 tanks is invaluable because they're sustain overall together, even though they have less health combined. The abilities that they can give each other out sustain 1 tank, right? On top of them being able to better protect their 2 supports, you can keep them up. Then you add on a super powered DPS into that comp who can actually chunk down other characters, right, more effectively. That's how you win. If you run 1 support, you're not going to have the resources. You're going to have to be, it's like fine. You have to play like really fast. I think like a ball diva comp could work really well in that regard, right? Something like that where you just kind of like Sombra Tracer, you know, kind of old like Brig Zen-esque comp, right? I think that could work pretty well, but overall it's going to be really, really hard. That'd be like super counter comp type thing. But if you roll out in the wrong thing, you're trying to counter comp, remember you can't swap roles. Not going to work, right? You're not actually gonna be able to counter them. So not a great idea. And 1 tank, always gonna suffer against 2 tanks. Just gonna happen. There's nothing that the tanks don't make up for what 2 tanks provide. Like 1 tank doesn't. Now this is not a comment on 5v5 versus 6v6 or anything like that. It's just the way that it's implemented here. It just doesn't work like I think it is supposed to. Like, keep that in mind, right? I'm not trying to say like inherently one is better than the other. It's just the way that they have it in this test doesn't really work, right? That is really, really a hard pill to swallow, because everyone's going to be playing 2 DPS. It's just going to happen. Regardless of how much more fun you may think it is to have 2 tanks on the battlefield, it is a hard sell to get most people to play tank already. So the best possible combination being 2 tanks is not like the more often than not, like I swear 80% of my games, we still had the king being the tank. That just happened. It was super hard to actually find a good game. Like I only was able to play 1 game where I was the king and I wasn't a tank. Like I was on a DPS. Like it was actually extremely difficult to even get anything outside of that. And that's a problem, right? Because again, if like it's probably going to be that the 2 tanks are the best. If you don't have 2 tanks, it's kind of trolling. And since you can't request swapping, you're stuck on that. You're just going to be like screwed the whole game. I just don't think it's going to work. Yeah, so that is that problem. Also with just like these extra like cooldown reductions and characters having more health, it's hard to track. It's hard to know, especially with cooldown reduction. Like it feels really awkward trying to think like, okay, they don't have that ability. Oh, I forgot. 20% cooldown reduction. Especially gets harder to track with, I don't know. Like, I don't know if it's actually harder to track with shorter abilities or longer abilities. Probably longer abilities, if I had to guess, because you kind of have to like reset your clock. It's already hard to track longer abilities anyways. So yeah, I just I don't know. I don't really like it. I don't like it that much. Now, I'll give it some credit. It is an interesting idea. I think, you know, I'm glad they tried something new, right? I don't want to just be like super Debbie Downer here. I did not like this test very much. I actually think max 2 regularly would work better if tanks were balanced properly. I think they should just remove their role passives in general if they're going to do that, but that's going to happen in the 6v6 test. So, you know, I feel like that's again, I've talked about this, but I think they're doing too much stuff differently between these 5v5 and 6v6 tests, that there's too many variables kind of confounding each other. which I'm sure we'll see very soon. But with that out of the way, the last thing I really want to talk about is that, you know, there has been a little bit of balanced philosophy about solo tank, because I think a lot of people think the solo tank has to be better or like make up for not having another tank, right? So the solo tank has to be as good as the other two, like a role combined, right? So two of your supports combined have to match the power of the tank. I think this is the wrong balanced philosophy. I don't think this is necessarily true. I don't think this has to be true. And I don't think it has been for Overwatch 2's lifetime. But having the Kingmaker, that is admitting that that the one person should be more powerful. And basically admitting that there is one person that should have more tools and be more powerful on the battlefield. I think that's a slippery slope, right? Because now it's like, okay, well, I'm the king, right? Psychologically, you think, I'm the king. I'm the most important person on the battlefield. I'm the strongest individual on the battlefield. I must perform. There is such a heavy weight on you. You know, people always talk about in Overwatch 2, the heavy weight on tanks. I think that was over-exaggerated, but here the game is literally telling you, you are. That is you. You have to be the guy. You have to be the person who is going to make or break this, right? You are the MVP. I don't think that's a good idea. I just don't think that is something that a lot of people want to stomach. I think that is a really hard ask. It's a hard sell. So to me, the phrasing, the way that this is implemented, and in fact, I don't think there's any way you could phrase this or implement it where people aren't going to think this. It's just not going to work. Just straight up, unfortunately, I think it is going to cause a lot more problems. I think people are going to feel a lot more pressure, and the game in general is going to suffer, especially on the ladder experience. I know when I play games and I'm kind of expected to be like the best person on the field, right? Like I played 50 hours in the Marvel Rivals beta, but when I'm getting in comp with randoms and I'm dropping like 35 kills when everybody else is dropping like 10 and we still lose, I still feel that way. Like I still could have done more, right? That is tough. And I don't want that to be every single game of Overwatch because it is baked in. Now, with that being said, I don't think this is happening. I don't think this is coming. I don't think this worked, right? I don't think people found this popular enough. It does suck that the test did happen with the Marvel Rivals launch because there's a lot of people who just aren't playing Overwatch because they're playing the new thing right now. Not to say that it's going to stay forever, right? I'm sure people will come back. I mean, I'm coming back. The season's about to start 2 hours from when this video goes live. So yeah, people will come back, obviously. But I do think it's important to point out that this test, I don't think really lit the world on fire. So I would not expect to see much from this test or the Max 2 test. I don't think this is really going to happen. I think there's a lot of baggage behind it. But with that out of the way, yeah. My conclusion here, not great. I don't want to see this. I never really agreed with this idea in the first place. I know a lot of people were just interested to see what it would turn out like. I kind of foresaw this. Like I kind of figured that this was not going to work like I thought. Like it was a little interesting just to see like the power level and the differences there. Like don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, it's still it still kind of confirmed all my suspicions with what I thought was going to happen here. So that is what I think about this. Please let me know what you think, but also subscribe to the channel if you like this video. I do really appreciate it. I will be live tonight on twitch.tv/Lane Hemingway to play the new season and probably also play a little bit of Marvel Rivals just because I'm a little addicted right now, honeymoon phase and all. But please like the video while you're at it. I really do appreciate it. And down below is my Discord server. Keep up to date with all of the topics and things going on soon. I've got a lot of stuff planned. I just don't know when they're going to come in the pipeline. So just be on the lookout there. Thank you guys so much for watching. And please, again, let me know what you think about this test. Have a good day.